Welcome to the By a Knee Hand Circle podcast with Ollie Lewis and Paul Catherall, bringing you closer together with global conversation and that By a Knee Hand spirit.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, our listeners out there. I never thought for 1 minute I'd be in a place where I can say we have listeners and audience. So thank you very much for all your ongoing support. It's Paul Catherall, the co-host of By a Knee Hand Circle podcast. I'm on my own today as a host. However, I have a wonderful, larger-than-life guest who's joining us. So, Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about you?
Great, thank you, Paul. I'm Chris McIntosh. I am a Chief Operations Officer within the BPO industry. I've been based in the Philippines for the last 17 years. Been in the BPO industry for near on 30 years. I'm not going to kind of say 30 years because it makes me sound old, and I certainly don't feel or look old. I'm married to a Filipino as well for the last 9 years, and we have a 16-month-old baby boy. Yes, I've been here literally, when I say 17 years, it's been on and off for 17 years because obviously being part of the BPO industry, what we've done is that we've been kind of commuting all around the world. And really looking at developing and pioneering sort of new BPO processes here in the Philippines.
Excellent, Chris. So you've been here for 17 years. Let's focus on the Philippines rather than say you've been in the BPO world for 30 years. So I don't want to go down that route. I don't want to add years to you. So I know we're going to kind of really get into the nuts and bolts about COVID and the BPO world as it looks, and maybe what the new normal look like. But before we get into that, just maybe tell our listeners from your perspective, whether it's personal or professional, maybe both actually, what for you are the benefits for living and working in the Philippines?
Yeah, I mean, it is both. It is professionally, it was 17 years ago. It was a case of we came here, we had a potential partner that we came to have a look at. And I could not believe the standard of voice quality here in the Philippines. Unfortunately, I've been used to various other parts of the world like India and South Africa. And so coming here was like a breath of fresh air for voice campaigns. It really was. I really, became a mercenary where I wanted to shift all of my voice work here to the Philippines. And again, at the time it was based out of Manila. It was based out of Alabang, and then kind of migrated to Ortigas in Pasig City. So most of my 17 years has been based out of Ortigas, which I kind of love. And then say 9 years ago, it became more personal because I met my partner, my wife, and therefore, you start to, although you start to come here, over the 17 years and you stay for say 6 months and you go off to another country. When I met her, I then became, stayed here more and more. So the 6 months kind of campaigns lasted more like, 12 months, and then it became like an everyday event. So for me, it's personal because we have a small baby now, and obviously when you become involved with a Filipino, you become involved with their family, and therefore, that was something that I'd never kind of experienced outside of the Philippines. Being accepted as a member of the family. So it's kind of hard now to kind of take that and go back to life outside of the Philippines. Of course, it's not a bad place, for somebody from the UK to settle. Certainly, Okay, I was just about to say you don't see much rain, but obviously we've just had a month where we hit the rainy season. But no, the weather is normally very warm. In fact, probably too warm for a Brit. But it's always pleasant. When you probably remember, Paul, back in your UK days, when the sun is shining, the day always feels a lot better, and that kind of sets the motion here. It really does.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right, Chris. And the previous guests that we've had on, particularly the expats, they've said that they've brought maybe the work Western culture into the Philippines. However, being immersed here, what they've taken away and have actually put into practice and places is the Filipino way of life when it comes to families, and how the important role that families plays in kind of the day-to-day life and making sure you've got that family support, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, I know it sounds kind of crazy, and obviously in our day and age, you go back to maybe working class England, where years and years ago the culture was the grandfather would go out and earn a living, and they'd come back and they'd expect their food on the table and all this kind of thing, and of course coming from a new age within the UK, you would not expect that, Paul.
No.
But I can't explain to my wife that because she does take tremendous care of me. Very much. I'm so grateful to her, and I say to her, listen, you don't have to do this. You don't. It's not what because we're married. It's not part of what your job spec is. I mean, obviously the Filipino culture is all about family, food, eating together.
Yeah.
And they kind of get offended if for example, I come in and they cook food and I'm probably not hungry. They kind of get offended if I say, "Oh, I'm not hungry." They look upon me as if I've committed the most serious. So, but I love all that. I love the fact that I'll come in. I'm in the BPO industry. If I'm working the the US markets, I'm coming in 7 o'clock in the morning, and the fact that they want to do a nice cooked meal at that time in the morning, it's kind of beyond my culture,
But it's great. It's a great testament in terms of the Filipino culture, that they want to take that level of care with you, regardless of what time it is. So that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So, Chris, if you don't mind, I would like to talk to you a little bit. Well, I don't know if a little bit, maybe a long bit, about the BPO world and how kind of you've seen the changes. So I don't want to go back 17 years, because what's happened 17 years ago has happened. What I do want to look about is, so where is it now in terms of COVID, and how do you think, again, it's your own opinion, how do you think the Philippines has responded to the COVID epidemic or pandemic, and where do you see the future being? Because there's so many moving parts at the moment, right?
Yeah, there is. I'd like to say that the last 6 months have been kind of difficult for the Philippines, and difficult for me as a Brit living here in the Philippines, because Paul, one thing about this place is, as you know, without COVID, it's 24/7.
Yes.
And with COVID, comes curfews, and therefore, when you run out of milk, or you run out of sugar, or you run out of something, you could kind of just pop down the road and there's a 7-Eleven. Now, no longer can you pop down the road at silly time at night and silly time in the morning. So I would have hoped by now. I mean, we just had it announced here in Manila that we're going to stay for 1 more month on GCQ, which I find disappointing, because I feel Manila or NCR is kind of ready now to go one step forward, and I think that would really do wonders for the BPO industry, because at the moment it's about social distancing in the workplace, and balance social distancing in the workplace against work from home. Now, where it is at the moment, we're very, very kind of lucky in my organization, because we have a large client who is probably around 40% of our seat capacity.
Okay.
They're kind of happy that we can offer a work from home environment.
Yeah.
But I believe that has its difficulties, because I think if somebody, certainly in the Filipino culture, where they live in communities where connectivity is kind of poor, and therefore you're having to spend more and more money on trying to beef up the connectivity to not a good rate, but to a sort of semi-adequate rate. And I believe that kind of adds to to the performance levels that you could perform a lot more if everything was back to normal and you were in an office. I also feel for these people, because they're working and living in one environment, so there's no change of environment. So, for example, they could be an agent living with their family, and therefore their setup is in their bedrooms. Of course, they sleep in their bedroom, they work in their bedroom. So where is the escape factor? Plus, in terms of their communication, it's kind of with their nearest and dearest. And I believe that in the BPO culture, what you need to be able to mix with your colleagues and find chismes, as they call it here in the Philippines, with your colleagues. That's all part of fun of going to work.
Yeah. And also, Chris, I think one of the points that, or one of the challenges that sometimes we miss in terms of leaders, is that we work different shifts. So if you're at home with your family, you could be sleeping during the day when your family's awake, right? And regardless, that has an impact on your performance. It's a tough discussion to have, but it has an impact, right?
Absolutely, and you're dead right. I'd even forgotten about that part of it, Paul, and also what it's also doing, to your mental ability as well.
Yes.
In terms of people are not getting motivated, or they're not getting, and they probably are getting kind of depressed, because they're finding it awkward.
Agreed.
So in terms of where it is at the moment, we've gone through the process back in March where we transitioned everybody out.
Okay.
And we had to put people on floating status, purely because clients did not want, because of security factors, they didn't want the work from home environment. So clearly we kind of, we were looking to try and bring people back into the office, which we've done. We're fairly lucky. We have two sites, Makati and Dumaguete. Dumaguete, we're very, very lucky, and that's been the kind of saving grace. But from April onwards, we our clients are actually increasing their seat capacity. So that's a great sign. Because we're hearing a lot of people in, say, the Makati area in NCR, are not as fortunate. And I know that there are a lot of people out there, good people. That's the thing that I express to the world, that the reason I came here 17 years ago was I said the voice quality here is second to none.
Amazing.
Talk about every other parts of the world and up and coming parts of the world. They even allude to places like South America. I still don't think the voice quality, I've been in the game a long time. Voice is my, and outbound is my top of my skill set, and I cannot fault Philippines in that arena. It really it really is.
Chris, I have kind of it's an awkward question, so feel free to dismiss it if you want, right? So obviously, as the BPO start to go back to the bricks and mortar environment, and then you have to factor in social distancing, there's, in my opinion, there's going to be situations where a campaign could have taken up X amount of space. It's now going to take up maybe double, if not 3 times the size of that space.
Yeah.
In your opinion, then, does that mean that because that by definition has a cost implication to the vendor, right? The vendor. Does that cost then get passed on to the client, or does the vendor have to be creative to kind of go, right, well, we have to do this? Because as a client, so I'm a client myself, I'm not going to suddenly want to see my bill go up, right? So what are the vendors, what are the BPOs looking at in ways to minimize that?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because we as BPOs have had to suffer the costs. What you find is the vendors have not done anything. You know, they're still holding out for their rents. I mean, we have a situation where in Dumagetti we're kind of more or less back, to as much capacity as we can be at 50%. You know, we still have people working from home.
Okay.
Here in McCarthy, there's added problems because we're on GCQ. There's still transport problems.
Yeah.
Certainly for the shift that we're working in the American markets. So, transport pretty much, stops at 10 o'clock at night,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't start again till 5 a.m. in the morning. Now, a lot of people that probably don't know out there that, in certain parts of NCR, agents would probably have a 2-hour travel.
Yeah.
So with the transport restrictions, that kind of causes an issue. So we are in a situation where we're paying our rents here in McCarthy, and we're probably at 30% seat capacity because of social distancing, number one, and because of transport, and because we're capable of having our other folks work from home. Where we do have problems again is that because of the situation here, if there is a COVID case, you kind of have to shut wherever that is. If you're on one floor, you have to look at the tracing element of the person who is regarded as positive, and then you would have to possibly close the floor down. You have to disinfect all the place and everything else, and certain people that have close tracing mechanisms with the positive cases will have to go off and be tested. So therefore that would have a massive impact. So what we're having to do physically within our offices is we are having to split the teams. So for example, if you had a client that had 50 seats on one floor, you now have that client with 25 seats on one floor and 25 seats on the other floor, just in case that if you get a case, you've got to be planning, for what could go wrong, disaster recovery all the time.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many questions I could ask, particularly from the benefits of working from home versus working from the office. And when you were talking about outbound, my background is sales, right? And I know the benefits in having a 20, 30 team in the one place, buzzing off each other, when the sales go up. So that in itself represents its own unique challenges, right? And not just and I don't mean to belittle the human element of it, but from a business element of it, from a sales perspective, that creates its own individual challenges. But I don't want to go down that route, Chris. That's what I did. Go on, sorry.
No, I totally agree. Obviously, we have outbound, and we also have non-voice accounts, working from home, and it doesn't matter what the account is. I do believe that you get more out of people when they're together, and it's also for team leaders and for operations management. They can actually physically, not these days, because you can't. When I say touch the staff, you can't.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
You can watch them. You can observe them. You can coach them. It's very difficult to do these kind of things remotely. It really is.
Yeah. When I was a team leader many moons ago, when I didn't have so many grey hairs, I would pride myself. I was never the best, but what I was good at was being able to pick up on the temperature or the pulse of the floor from a sales campaign, right? And I would be able to have those arm around the shoulder chats with the agents. I'm not a great coach. I don't do like the stop, start, continue model very well at all, but I'm a good person when it comes to getting the best out of people on a face-to-face, standpoint. I know in this current environment that I would struggle to do that remotely because of the type of manager I am, right? So kudos to everybody out there who's doing it. I think it's great, to be honest with you, mate.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Cool. Going back to kind of the companies and of going through COVID at the moment, one thing, and I think it's important to mention, and I don't know if you really emphasized it enough, but you guys have been growing now since April, right? That's in the midst of a pandemic. You guys are growing. And what I'm seeing is that the companies that have got their cultures and their values aligned to the human aspect, and they're looking after the staff, those are the ones that will come out of this pandemic better placed. Is that something that you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I agree. The organization I run is American ownership, and these guys have been fabulous to their staff. They just celebrated 9 years. So what they did was, and it was kind of sad because pre-COVID, you could imagine, a whole get together, in an environment with a few beers, Paul,
and a few sandbags,
and absolutely, and obviously giving out prizes and bits and pieces. We were able to kind of do it in Dumagetti, but in McCarthy, it kind of, it didn't happen. So I kind of feel for the half of the organization in McCarthy because they were not able to go out and we were not able to sort of mix. But so we're kind of looking forward to the day that we can, and those couple of beers will now be probably a crate per person. But also, we were giving out. Everybody got a prize. Everybody got something as a memorial as a memento, not a memorial, of 9 years. I hope it's a memorial of COVID soon. And then we were giving out, special awards, for people that have been in the organisation, the whole 9 years, or a good part of that 9 years. And then we also celebrated the fact that people that work through COVID, whether they work from home or whether they came into the office and trialed all through the traffic problems or the sort of transport problems, and purely and simply, we were giving out special presentations to these people. So and again, there's a lot of money that's been lost through COVID, but a lot of money that's been injected back into the people.
Perfect. Excellent. Wonderful stories there, Chris. And honestly, I could speak to you for the rest of the day. Unfortunately, we don't have that amount of time. So as we kind of come to the close of the podcast, I've got a couple of questions for you. So my first one is, in one sentence, what does the Philippines mean to you? And that sentence can be as long as you want, but what does the Philippines mean to you?
Sure. Okay. Well, at the moment, it's my life. It's my work life and my home life. My family are here. I'm settled here, and I work here, and I cannot foresee myself kind of working anywhere else other than the Philippines. So for me, it's everything. It's work and home life.
Lovely. I love that. Thanks. Company, the floor is yours, my friend. Go ahead.
Oh, that's really kind. Okay, so the organisation is Peak Outsourcing. You can find me on LinkedIn under Chris Mackintosh, and that's with a K, Mackintosh. If you're outside of the Philippines, best way to find me is on LinkedIn, or email Chris M, that's M for mother, or Mackintosh in this case, at peakoutsourcing.com. You can find me there. Organization, we're 24/7, we're multi-channel, and happy to talk about any kind of campaign that you want us to look at. we do a good job. As I say, we're very experienced. I've been in the game a long time. Very, very, very good on voice. The organisation has also got a strong structure on non-voice across multi-verticals. So happy to hear from anybody.
Excellent. Chris, thank you so much, mate. You've been a wonderful guest. I'd love to get you back on and do a separate podcast about, the BPO and do a bit of a deeper dive about performance, but we'll talk about it later. You've been a star, my friend. Thank you so much. And I love your enthusiasm and passion for the Philippines. You've been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. It's been great talking to you.
And you. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Buy-in Neham Circle podcast. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube by searching Buy-in Neham Circle Podcast. And reach out anytime by emailing us, buyinnehamcirclepodcast@gmail.com. See you next time.